The girl walked slowly down the cracked streets, her thin coat doing little to protect her from the chilly morning wind. She carried a small cloth bag, the only possession she could call her own, and her shoes were worn and muddy from days of walking. She had learned to move quietly, to stay out of trouble, and to avoid the harsh eyes of people who barely noticed her existence. Life on the streets had taught her to be careful, to hide when needed, and to hold on to the little joys that came her way. And music, though she had no piano to play most days, was her greatest joy. She had discovered her love for the piano when she was younger, in a small community center where an old upright piano sat in the corner of a dusty room. No one else seemed to care for it, and sometimes she was allowed to sit and press the keys, creating soft melodies that made her feel alive. She would sit there for hours, her fingers dancing over the worn keys, forgetting the hunger in her stomach and the cold biting at her fingers. Music was the only thing that made her feel free, the only thing that made her feel like she belonged somewhere. Today was different. Today there was an event happening in the city hall, a music performance for the community. She had been wandering nearby, hoping to find a safe place to rest, when she saw the large building with lights and decorations. People were arriving in their best clothes, carrying instruments or tickets, smiling and laughing. She felt a strange mix of excitement and fear. She wanted to go inside to see the music being played, but she also knew that people like her were not usually welcomed. A woman at the entrance noticed her lingering and asked if she wanted to help with the event. The girl nodded quickly, relieved that someone had spoken to her. She had been asked to clean the stage, to sweep and tidy before the performers arrived. It was a simple task, and though it was far from glamorous, it gave her a reason to be there. As she worked, moving quietly across the wooden floor, she could hear the tuning of instruments and the soft hum of people preparing for the show. Her heart beat faster. She was so close to the music, almost close enough to touch it. The stage was large, with polished wooden floors and bright lights shining down. She swept carefully, making sure every corner was neat, all the while listening to the sound of violins, flutes, and soft piano notes drifting from the rehearsal room. She stopped occasionally, letting her fingers hover as if she could play along in her mind. Every note was a reminder of her dream, a dream she had held onto even when life seemed determined to take everything else from her. She noticed some of the performers laughing and talking, their instruments resting by their sides. They looked so confident and skilled, and for a moment, doubt crept into her mind. Who was she, a girl who lived on the streets, to think she could ever perform in front of an audience like this? But then she remembered the feeling of the keys under her fingers, the music that had always been hers no matter what else had been lost. She pushed the fear aside, focusing on the rhythm of her sweeping, imagining herself dancing with the music in her own little world. People passed by, giving her curious glances. Some smiled politely, others barely noticed her at all. She had grown used to being invisible, to existing in the spaces between the lives of those who had more. But something about today felt different. She felt a quiet energy in the air, a sense that something unexpected could happen. She didn't know what it was yet, but she could feel it in the steady beat of her heart and the flutter in her stomach. The manager of the event approached her, a clipboard in hand. He spoke kindly, explaining where she should place the cleaning supplies and which areas needed attention the most. She listened carefully, nodding, and followed his instructions. Every movement she made was careful and deliberate. She wanted to do her task well, to prove that even a girl like her could be trusted to help with something important. She moved quietly around the stage, sweeping, dusting, and arranging small chairs and stands that would hold sheet music. As she worked, she noticed the piano sitting in the corner of the stage, gleaming under the lights. Her heart skipped a beat. It was beautiful, polished, and perfectly tuned. She had never seen a piano like this up close before. She ran her fingers along the smooth surface, careful not to damage it, imagining how the notes would sound if she could play. Her imagination carried her away, and for a moment, she forgot the cold, the hunger, and the uncertainty of her life. She only felt the music. A performer walked by and saw her lingering near the piano. He smiled gently, commenting on how careful she was with the instrument. She blushed, ducking her head, and continued her work. She didn't want to draw attention, yet she couldn't stop thinking about the keys and the melodies she could create. She wondered if anyone would ever let her play in a real performance, in front of people who had paid to hear music, people who expected perfection. The girl finished sweeping and stepped back, looking around the stage. Everything was neat and ready. She felt a small sense of pride in her work. It wasn't much, but it was something she had accomplished. She moved to the side, sitting quietly on a small stool, watching the performers as they practiced and rehearsed. Each note that floated through the air made her heart swell. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting the music wash over her, imagining herself on that stage, the spotlight on her, the audience listening in awe. Time passed, and the room slowly filled with people. The lights grew brighter, and the hum of conversation filled the air. She stayed near the back, careful not to be in anyone's way, yet feeling a strange sense of belonging. Music had a way of breaking down walls, even for a girl who had no home, no family, and no place in society. She realized that today, for just a few hours, she could exist among people who loved music as much as she did. She could breathe in the melodies, feel the rhythm, and dream. As the final preparations were made, she noticed the piano again. It seemed to call to her, whispering melodies she knew by heart. She pressed a key softly with her fingertip, making a quiet note that blended with the other instruments. Her heart leapt. The sound was more beautiful than she had imagined. She couldn't resist pressing another key, and then another, until a small, delicate tune filled the corner where she sat. Nobody seemed to notice, or maybe they chose not to, and she let herself play for just a few moments, letting the music flow through her fingers and into the room. A performer stopped nearby, looking at her with surprise and curiosity. She froze, afraid she had done something wrong. But instead of scolding her, the performer smiled and whispered, "You have talent." The words lingered in her mind, giving her courage she hadn't felt in a long time. For the first time in years, she felt seen, noticed, and appreciated for something beyond her situation, beyond the dirt and the cold and the struggles of living on the street. The girl straightened, taking a deep breath. She returned to her stool, quietly finishing the last of her cleaning. But her mind kept returning to the piano. She felt a flicker of hope, a sense that maybe this day could be different. Maybe this day could change something for her. Music had always been her secret, her refuge, and now, in the middle of a bustling hall full of talent and expectation, it felt like it might be her chance to step out of the shadows, even if just for a moment. She finished her task and stepped back, letting the performers take their places. Her hands itched to play, and her heart beat faster with anticipation and fear. She reminded herself to stay quiet, to stay in the background. Yet the piano seemed to shine brighter in the lights, as if it was inviting her to come closer. She sat down on the stool again, fingers hovering over the keys, feeling the energy of the room and the warmth of the lights. She didn't know what would happen next, but for the first time in a long time, she felt ready for something extraordinary. The girl watched quietly from the side of the stage, her eyes fixed on the performers who were moving gracefully across the floor. The musicians were warming up, running their fingers over strings, tapping keys, and adjusting instruments. She stayed low, careful not to draw attention, but her heart was racing with a mixture of fear and excitement. This was the closest she had ever been to a real performance, and every sound made her dream grow bigger. She remembered the small piano at the community center where she had first learned to play. It was nothing compared to this grand instrument on the stage, but it had been her companion for years. It had listened to her sadness, her hopes, and her tiny victories. Every melody she had learned there was etched into her memory. And now, seeing this beautiful piano, she felt an urge she had never felt before. She wanted to play, to show the music that had lived inside her all these years. The event organizers were busy, moving chairs, checking microphones, and speaking softly into walkie-talkies. They did not notice the girl sitting at the edge of the stage, her fingers itching to touch the keys. She took a deep breath and imagined what it would feel like to sit at the piano and let her hands tell the story she had carried for so long. Her fingers hovered above the keys, trembling slightly, as if they already knew the magic they could create. A young violinist passed by and looked at her curiously. "Do you play?" he asked softly. She hesitated, not sure if she should answer. Her voice was quiet, almost a whisper. "Yes," she said. The violinist smiled, nodding, and moved on, leaving her with a flutter of encouragement she had not expected. That small acknowledgement made her feel seen, more than she had felt in months. As the musicians continued to warm up, she noticed a small mishap. One of the pianists scheduled to perform was nowhere to be found, and the stage manager looked worried. They glanced around, muttering among themselves, unsure of what to do. The girl felt her heart leap. She stayed in her seat, trying to calm herself, but a thought kept returning. Maybe, just maybe, this was her chance. She shook her head quickly, thinking it was impossible. She was only here to clean. She was not supposed to perform, but the thought would not go away. The music filled the hall, warm and inviting, and she closed her eyes, imagining her fingers moving effortlessly across the piano. Every note she had learned in secret came back to her as if it had been waiting for this moment. She could feel the rhythm of the music in her chest, and it gave her courage. The fear was still there, but the music was stronger. She could not resist the pull any longer. Slowly, she stood and approached the piano. Her hands trembled as she sat on the bench, unsure if anyone would stop her. She took a deep breath and pressed a key. The sound rang clear and bright, cutting through the quiet hum of the hall. She pressed another, then another, letting the melody flow naturally, as if her hands had been waiting all this time for this exact moment. The music was soft at first, a delicate whisper that seemed almost too small for the large stage, but with every note, it grew stronger. From the corner of her eye, she noticed that a few people had turned to look. Their eyes widened in surprise, then curiosity. No one had expected her to play, and yet here she was, filling the space with a tune that was entirely hers. She did not stop to think about judgment or approval. She only thought about the music and the joy it brought her. Each note carried a piece of her life, her struggles, and her dreams. The stage manager came closer, frowning, unsure whether to interrupt. He was about to step forward when one of the musicians whispered to him. He paused, listening, and then slowly smiled. The girl continued to play, her fingers dancing over the keys with confidence she had never known she could possess. The sound was beautiful, full of emotion, and it captured the attention of everyone in the room. The performers stopped practicing, the organizers paused their work, and the audience, still entering, turned to listen. For the first time in her life, she felt noticed for her talent rather than her circumstances. She had been overlooked for so long that the recognition of her skill was overwhelming. Tears filled her eyes, but she did not stop playing. She let the music carry her, letting it tell her story without words. The melody was both gentle and powerful, filled with hope, longing, and resilience. Every note seemed to reach out, touching the hearts of the people who listened. The audience began to gather near the stage, drawn by the unexpected sound. People whispered among themselves, trying to understand who was playing with such skill. Some smiled, others looked astonished, and a few were visibly moved, wiping tears from their eyes. She played on, lost in the music, feeling as if the piano was an extension of herself. It was not just an instrument. It was a bridge between her hidden world and the people who had never noticed her before. As the final notes of her piece lingered in the air, there was a moment of silence, a collective breath held in awe. Then, slowly, applause began to rise, soft at first, then louder and stronger. She looked up, surprised to see so many faces turned toward her, smiling and clapping. Her heart pounded, a mixture of joy and disbelief. She had never performed for an audience before, and now here she was, celebrated for the gift she had carried quietly for so long. The stage manager approached, his face a mixture of amazement and respect. "That was incredible," he said, shaking his head. "Where did you learn to play like that?" She shrugged shyly, a small smile forming on her lips. "On my own," she whispered. Love it. The musicians gathered around, some offering gentle congratulations, others simply nodding in approval. They had seen her talent and understood it was real. The girl felt a warmth in her chest that she had not known in a long time. She realized that, for the first time, she was more than her situation. She was a musician, a storyteller, a girl who could create beauty out of her life despite its challenges. After the applause died down, she stepped back, feeling a mix of relief and exhilaration. The music had given her courage and a glimpse of possibility. She returned to her corner, her heart still racing, knowing that something had changed. She had shown the world a part of herself that had been hidden, and in doing so, she had discovered a strength she had not realized she possessed. The performers returned to their instruments, now more aware of the girl who had surprised them. They played with renewed energy, inspired by the unexpected brilliance they had witnessed. The girl watched, feeling a sense of belonging she had never experienced before. For the first time, she felt that her place in the world might be more than just surviving. She could be part of something larger, something beautiful, something that recognized her for who she truly was. The event continued, but the girl knew that this day would stay with her forever. She had faced her fears, stepped into the unknown, and shared her music with the world. Even if no one ever remembered her name, she had made her presence known through the power of her talent. And in that moment, she understood that her dreams were not impossible, that her love for music could carry her through even the darkest times. As the audience filled the hall and the lights dimmed for the official start of the performance, she quietly returned to her seat, feeling a calm joy. She had done something extraordinary, something that no one had expected, including herself. The piano had been her secret, her companion, and now it had become her voice. And even though she was still a girl who had known hardship, for a brief, shining moment, she was more than her circumstances. She was a musician, and the world had listened. The girl had never felt anything like it before. The sound of applause still echoed in her ears, and her heart raced with excitement and disbelief. She had been noticed, not for who she was on the streets, but for what she could create with her hands. For a brief moment, the world had stopped and listened to her, and it was a feeling she wanted to hold on to forever. As the performers prepared for the next piece, the stage seemed to shift. The bright lights highlighted the piano she had just played, and a small crowd had gathered at the edge of the stage, curious and intrigued. Some whispered to each other, pointing at the girl, while others simply watched in awe. She felt their eyes on her, and a mixture of fear and exhilaration surged through her. She had never performed like this, never played in front of so many people at once. Her fingers twitched with anticipation, and she felt the familiar pull of the piano calling her again. She moved to the side, thinking she should leave the stage clear for the performers, but the music kept tugging at her heart. She closed her eyes, remembering the melodies she had practiced for years, alone in cold, quiet rooms or sitting on the dusty floor of the community center. Every note was a memory, a fragment of her life, a whisper of hope that had never left her. Now, the opportunity to play felt more real than ever, yet also more frightening. Could she step into the spotlight again, knowing everyone was watching? The stage manager looked worried, speaking softly to a few of the performers. One of the scheduled pianists was still missing, and the performance was about to begin. The girl's heart leapt as she realized this could be her chance. She hesitated, unsure if she should speak up or remain in the shadows. But the music in her heart would not be ignored. She slowly approached the piano, her steps careful and deliberate, as if each one carried the weight of her dreams and fears. Her fingers hovered above the keys. She took a deep breath, trying to steady the tremor in her hands. The audience was filling the hall now, a sea of faces watching the stage. Some were smiling politely, others looked curious, and a few were already whispering about the girl who had played earlier. She had never felt so exposed, yet the pull of the piano was irresistible. She pressed a single key, a gentle note that seemed to echo through the hall. It was soft, almost fragile, but it carried the weight of her life, her struggles, and her unspoken dreams. As she began to play, the melody slowly grew, each note more confident than the last. The audience fell silent, drawn to the unexpected music. The performers paused, listening, their expressions changing from curiosity to amazement. The girl felt herself melting into the piano, every movement of her fingers telling a story of hardship, hope, and resilience. The music was no longer just sound. It was a bridge between her world and theirs, a language that needed no words. Tears welled in her eyes as she played, but she did not stop. Every note was a declaration, a way to show the world that she existed, that her life had meaning beyond the streets and the hardships she had endured. She played with passion, with emotion, letting the piano speak for her when she could not. The audience was captivated, some leaning forward, some closing their eyes, and a few wiping away tears. Her music had touched them in ways she had never imagined. The stage manager watched in amazement, torn between concern and awe. He could have stopped her, reminded her that she was not scheduled to perform, but he saw something in her playing that could not be ignored. The girl was extraordinary, and the music coming from her hands demanded to be heard. The hall seemed to breathe with her, every note resonating with the listeners, drawing them deeper into her story. She played on, each melody flowing naturally, each chord building upon the last. Her fear began to fade, replaced by a growing confidence. The piano was no longer intimidating. It was a partner, a friend, a voice for everything she had kept hidden inside. She imagined the small community center where she had first learned to play, the dusty floors, and the quiet afternoons spent alone with the piano. All those moments had led her here, to this stage, in front of an audience that had never expected her talent. The audience was now fully engaged, their attention fixed entirely on her. People were whispering, pointing, and exchanging amazed glances. The girl could feel the energy in the room, the collective heartbeat of hundreds of people responding to her music. She had never felt so powerful, yet so humble. Every note was a gift, and she poured herself into the piano, letting the music carry her beyond fear and doubt. Time seemed to stretch and bend as she played. The lights glinted off the polished piano, the shadows danced across the stage, and every sound seemed amplified, echoing her story. The girl's hands moved with precision and grace, yet with an emotional depth that only years of longing and struggle could produce. She was no longer just a girl on the streets. She was a storyteller, a musician, a force that commanded attention without demanding it. Suddenly, the missing pianist appeared at the edge of the stage, looking stunned. The organizers whispered urgently, unsure whether to intervene. But no one moved. The girl was in the middle of a crescendo, her music filling every corner of the hall. The sound was so full, so alive, that it seemed impossible to interrupt. Even the performers who had been rehearsing looked on in awe, recognizing that this was a moment they would remember forever. The final notes of her piece rang out, lingering in the air like a gentle echo. For a moment, there was complete silence, as if the hall itself was holding its breath. Then, slowly, applause began to rise, growing louder and more insistent. People stood, clapping and cheering, some wiping tears from their eyes. The girl's heart pounded in her chest, and she sat still for a moment, overwhelmed by the response. She had never imagined that her music could touch so many people, that it could create such a reaction. The stage manager approached, his face a mixture of awe and relief. "That was incredible," he said, shaking his head. "You have something special. Have you ever considered performing professionally?" The girl smiled shyly, her heart swelling. She had dreamed of this, but it had always seemed impossible. Now it was real. I just love to play," she whispered, her voice soft but steady. The musicians gathered around, offering congratulations, nodding in admiration, and some even asking if she could join them for the next piece. She felt a warmth in her chest, a sense of belonging that she had never known. She realized that this stage, this piano, and these people had become a part of her story. The music she had carried in secret was finally being heard, recognized, and celebrated. As the audience continued to cheer, she took a deep breath and looked around the hall. She felt a quiet pride, a sense of accomplishment that went beyond the applause. She had faced her fears, stepped into the unknown, and shared her gift with the world. For the first time, she understood that her life on the streets did not define her. Her talent, her passion, and her courage did. She returned to her seat, feeling a calm joy and a sense of possibility. The event continued, but for her, something had shifted. She had discovered a strength and confidence she did not know she possessed. The music had not only told her story to others, but had also revealed to her the power she held within. She was no longer invisible. She had a voice, and it had been heard. The rest of the performers continued, inspired by the girl who had emerged from the shadows to play with brilliance. The audience remained captivated, carrying with them the memory of the unexpected, extraordinary performance. And the girl, sitting quietly, knew that her journey was only beginning. She had found a way to transform her life, one note at a time, and the world had finally listened. The girl felt a rush of excitement and fear as she returned to the piano. The applause from her previous performance still lingered in the hall, echoing in her ears and filling her chest with a strange warmth. She had touched the hearts of those who had listened, and now she knew that her music had power beyond anything she had ever imagined. Yet, the next performance was about to begin, and the pressure weighed heavily on her. Could she do it again? Could she play with the same emotion, the same connection, and the same magic? She placed her fingers lightly on the keys, feeling the familiar smoothness under her fingertips. The piano seemed to respond, almost as if it recognized her touch, welcoming her back to its side. She closed her eyes and let her mind drift to the melodies she had practiced in secret for years. Each note carried memories of quiet afternoons, lonely nights, and moments of hope that had kept her moving forward. She drew in a deep breath and began to play. The first notes were soft and tentative, but as she continued, the music grew bolder. Her hands moved with a confidence that surprised even her, each chord ringing clear and true. The hall seemed to hold its breath, the audience captivated by the unexpected brilliance that flowed from her fingertips. She could hear whispers of amazement, but she did not let them distract her. She was lost in the music, her soul pouring out with every note. The melody was a journey through her life, filled with sorrow, longing, and hope. She thought of the nights she had spent sleeping under the stars, the hunger she had endured, and the cold that had bitten her bones. But she also thought of the small joys, the music that had carried her through, and the dreams that had never died. Her fingers moved faster, the notes dancing and weaving a story that only she could tell. The audience sat in rapt attention, unable to look away. A few performers watched from the side, their expressions a mix of awe and disbelief. They had seen talent before, but this was something different. It was raw, emotional, and deeply human. The girl's music spoke of a life rarely seen, yet universally understood. Tears formed in some eyes as they felt the honesty and beauty of the performance. For a moment, the hall was filled with nothing but the music and the emotions it stirred. She played with her whole heart, every movement precise yet filled with feeling. The piano seemed to sing beneath her fingers, responding to the passion she had always kept hidden. Her fear had melted away, replaced by a profound connection to the instrument and the audience. She realized that the music did not belong to her alone. It belonged to everyone who could feel it, everyone who could understand its language. The final section of her piece approached, a complex combination of fast and slow notes that required both skill and emotion. Her hands flew over the keys, creating a cascade of sound that filled the hall with energy and intensity. The audience was mesmerized, some leaning forward, some closing their eyes, and a few wiping away tears. The music spoke of struggle and triumph, of pain transformed into beauty, and of hope that could never be extinguished. As she reached the climax, the notes became more powerful, resonating through every corner of the room. She could feel the audience responding, their hearts beating in time with the rhythm she had created. The energy was electric, a shared experience that connected the performer and the listeners in a way words could never describe. She had never felt so alive, so seen, and so connected to the world around her. Then, slowly, she began to bring the melody to a close. The final notes were soft and gentle, like a whisper, fading into silence. The hall remained still for a moment, as if holding onto the last echoes of her music. Then, without warning, the applause erupted. It was thunderous, filling the room with claps, cheers, and cries of amazement. The girl's eyes widened, and she felt tears streaming down her face. She had done it. She had shared her heart with the world, and they had heard her. People rushed to the stage, some standing to get a closer look, others clapping and cheering. The performers and organizers surrounded her, offering congratulations and expressing their astonishment at her talent. The stage manager shook his head in disbelief. "I have never seen anything like that," he said. "You have a gift, a rare gift. You should be performing everywhere." The girl smiled, overwhelmed by the recognition. She had never expected this, had never dreamed that her music could have such an impact. She had always played for herself, for the solace it brought her in difficult times. But now, she realized that her music could touch others, could inspire, and could bring joy in ways she had never imagined. As the applause continued, she felt a sense of peace settle over her. She had faced her fears, stepped into the spotlight, and shared something deeply personal with the world. For the first time, she felt that her life had meaning beyond survival, that her talent and passion could open doors she had never thought possible. She had proven to herself that she was capable, strong, and worthy of being seen. The audience gradually quieted down, still murmuring their admiration. Some people came forward to speak to her, expressing how moved they had been by her performance. She listened, smiling softly, feeling a warmth in her chest that had nothing to do with applause or praise. It was the simple understanding that her music had reached others, that her story had been heard through the notes she played. The performers returned to their instruments, but the energy in the hall had changed. They were inspired by the girl who had emerged from the shadows to play with such brilliance. The music continued, but everyone knew that the moment they had witnessed was extraordinary. It was not just a performance. It was a declaration, a testament to resilience, talent, and the human spirit. After the event, the girl sat quietly on the side of the stage, letting the adrenaline and excitement fade. She reflected on what had happened, feeling a mixture of gratitude and awe. She had stepped into a world she had only dreamed of, and she had made a mark that could never be erased. Her music had given her a voice, a presence, and a sense of possibility that she had never known. The stage manager approached her once more, holding out a hand. "We need to talk about your future," he said, smiling. "There are people who would love to help you, to give you the chance to perform regularly. Your talent is too great to stay hidden." The girl nodded, tears of joy welling in her eyes. She had never imagined such an opportunity, never thought that her life could change so dramatically in a single day. As she left the hall that evening, the girl felt a new sense of hope. She walked through the streets she had known so well, but now they seemed different, brighter, full of possibilities. The music that had always lived within her had finally found its way into the world, and she knew that her journey was only beginning. She had faced fear, uncertainty, and doubt, and had emerged stronger, braver, and more determined than ever. The night was quiet, and the stars above seemed to shine just a little brighter. The girl smiled, thinking of all the music still inside her, waiting to be played, waiting to touch hearts and inspire others. She knew that life would not always be easy, that challenges would come, but she had discovered something unshakable within herself. Her talent, her courage, and her love for music would guide her through whatever lay ahead. And for the first time, she truly believed in the beauty and possibility of her own future. The girl walked slowly out of the hall, her hands still trembling from the performance. The streets she had walked for years now seemed different, somehow brighter, filled with possibility she had never dared to imagine. She had shown her music to the world, and for the first time people had listened and understood. Her heart was full of a strange warmth, a mixture of pride, joy, and hope. The next day, the stage manager came to meet her with a kind smile and a stack of envelopes. "There are people who want to help you," he said. "Scholarships, lessons, opportunities to perform. You've shown something remarkable, and we want to make sure it continues." The girl blinked, overwhelmed. She had never expected this. The world had never offered her anything so generous or kind. She nodded quietly, unable to find the words, her mind racing with the thought of what her life could now become. She started attending music lessons with professional teachers who marveled at her natural talent. Every note she played seemed effortless, yet it carried a depth and emotion that could not be taught. She learned new techniques, improved her skill, and began preparing for more performances. Each day brought a mixture of excitement and hard work, but she embraced it fully, grateful for the chance to grow and to explore her gift. People who had known her only as a girl struggling on the streets now saw her in a new light. Some offered encouragement, some mentorship, and a few even small gestures of support. She was learning to trust again, to accept kindness without hesitation. Her music became a bridge, connecting her to a world that had once seemed inaccessible. Each performance reminded her of how far she had come, and each opportunity renewed her belief that her dreams were possible. She performed at small community events at first, and the audiences were captivated. Her music was full of emotion, telling stories of hardship, hope, and resilience without a single word. People began to recognize her, to anticipate her performances, and to follow her journey. She felt a growing sense of responsibility and joy, realizing that her music could inspire others just as it had carried her through difficult times. Her life was gradually changing. The small apartment she was given became a place of safety and comfort, somewhere she could rest and practice freely. Her days of wandering the streets were over, replaced by a routine filled with music, lessons, and performances. She still remembered the cold nights, the hunger, and the uncertainty, but those memories now felt distant. They were part of her story, part of the strength and depth she brought to her music. One afternoon, she was invited to perform at a larger city concert hall. The stage was grand, with bright lights and a polished piano that gleamed under the spotlight. She felt a flutter of nerves, but also a deep sense of purpose. She walked onto the stage, her fingers hovering above the keys, and took a deep breath. The hall was filled with an eager audience, waiting to hear the music of a girl who had once been invisible. Her life was gradually changing. The small apartment she was given became a place of safety and comfort, somewhere she could rest and practice freely. Her days of wandering the streets were over, replaced by a routine filled with music, lessons, and performances. She still remembered the cold nights, the hunger, and the uncertainty, but those memories now felt distant. They were part of her story, part of the strength and depth she brought to her music. One afternoon, she was invited to perform at a larger city concert hall. The stage was grand, with bright lights and a polished piano that gleamed under the spotlight. She felt a flutter of nerves, but also a deep sense of purpose. She walked onto the stage, her fingers hovering above the keys, and took a deep breath. The hall was filled with an eager audience, waiting to hear the music of a girl who had once been invisible as she played. The music flowed effortlessly. Her hands danced over the keys, creating melodies that were powerful, tender, and deeply moving. The audience was captivated, leaning forward, closing their eyes, and letting the music wash over them. She played with the confidence of someone who had faced adversity and emerged stronger. Every note told a story, not just of her struggles, but of her hope, her courage, and her unwavering love for music. After the performance, people rushed to congratulate her. Some cried, moved by the beauty and honesty of her music. The stage manager, teachers, and fellow musicians all expressed admiration, amazed at how someone who had once been homeless could command such talent and emotion. The girl smiled, her heart swelling with gratitude. She had come a long way, and each step had been worth it. Her music had transformed her life, giving her a voice, a place, and a purpose. She also began to mentor other children who were struggling. She visited community centers, schools, and shelters, sharing her music and her story. She wanted others to know that talent and hope could survive even the harshest circumstances. Her own experiences gave her a unique perspective, and she could connect with children who felt unseen, helping them find their own strength and courage. Over time, her performances grew more frequent and more widely recognized. People started to see her as a symbol of resilience and talent, a reminder that the human spirit could overcome great challenges. She traveled to different cities, sharing her music with new audiences and inspiring countless people. Each performance carried the memory of her past, but also the promise of the future. She had become more than a musician. She had become a storyteller and a beacon of hope. Despite her growing success, she never forgot where she had come from. She often returned to the streets and the community centers where she had once played quietly in the corner. She remembered the cold nights, the fear, and the loneliness, and she used those memories to fuel her music and her compassion. She knew that her journey had not only changed her life, but had the potential to touch the lives of many others. Her piano continued to be her closest companion, the instrument through which she expressed everything she felt. She spent hours practicing, creating new pieces, and refining her skill. Music was no longer just a refuge. It was a gift she shared with the world. Each performance reminded her of the power of perseverance, the beauty of hope, and the importance of believing in oneself, even when circumstances seemed impossible. Friends, teachers, and audience members all marveled at her transformation. They saw a girl who had once been homeless now thriving, confident, and sharing her talent with the world. Yet, she remained humble, grounded by her experiences and grateful for every opportunity. She knew that life could change in an instant, and she cherished the chance to make a difference through her music. Her story became well known, inspiring articles, interviews, and even documentaries about her journey. People were fascinated by the contrast between her difficult past and her extraordinary talent. Yet, for her, it was never about fame or recognition. It was about music, about the joy of playing, and about sharing a piece of her heart with others. Each note she played carried a message: that hope could survive, that dreams could come true, and that no circumstance could define the value of a person. Years passed, and she continued to grow as a musician and as a person. She performed on grand stages, collaborated with other artists, and taught aspiring musicians. She never forgot the cold nights and the empty streets, and she used her experiences to guide others toward opportunities they might not have thought possible. Her life had been transformed by a single chance, a single moment when she had shared her music, and she dedicated herself to creating similar opportunities for others. Looking back, she realized that her journey had been shaped not only by talent, but by courage, perseverance, and the willingness to step forward despite fear. The world had responded to her honesty, her skill, and her heart. She had proven that even in the darkest circumstances, light could shine through. And in that light, she had found herself, her music, and her place in the world. The girl who had once walked the streets alone now walked confidently through life, carrying her piano wherever she went, and sharing her gift with anyone who would listen. She knew that life could still bring challenges, but she also knew that she had the strength to face them. Music had given her a voice, and through it, she had found freedom, hope, and a way to inspire others. Her story was no longer just her own. It belonged to everyone who needed to believe in the power of dreams and the resilience of the human spirit.